The Second Great Awakening, Creation, Change. In a time of relative calm in the United States of America, a religious revival swept across the forest lands of the northeastern United States, down and west into the burgeoning frontier.
What allowed this to happen was the separation of church and state. The Second Great Awakening was able to happen because of the changes in the American people and during the first quarter of the 1800s.
Spanning approximately 40 years, from the last decade of the 18th century well into the 1830s, the Second Great Awakening launched the states into an era of religious fervor. Circuit riding and voluntary associations came into being, while even more Protestant denominations rose in prominence. The effects of this time period would carry out another 200 years into the present day.
19th century America reminds me of a lot of things. It reminds me of the railroad, the Civil War, my history of starring in really weird science fiction movies whose general plots harken back to a stereotypical 19th century Western setting movie. It also reminds me of my Catholic upbringing and how different Catholicism is compared to some areas of religious thought that arose during this time period of America's history. For the generic and unnamed channel of the dissemination of random knowledge through the use of short documentaries as part of a vaguely related series, I'm Peter Weller, and this is Renovating a Religion.
Joseph Smith, born in the small town of Sharon, Vermont in 1805. In his early 20s, Smith received a vision. An angel had appeared to him, telling him that by finding 2 golden plates and translating their inscriptions, he would be able to bring back the true church. In 1827, in a mysterious stone box under a large hill near present-day Manchester, New York, his search ended.
Now, Joseph Smith actually wore a large hat to cover the golden plates.
Really?
Yes, he claimed that the angel and his vision gave him explicit instructions to hide the plates from anyone until they have been fully translated.
And these plates were in refined Egyptian, so no one was actually able to translate them, and no one knows if Joseph Smith was able to translate them correctly.
That is correct. He claimed to have magic stones called the Urim and the Thummim to help him translate them.
And this is the Book of Mormon?
Yes, it contained Joseph Smith's very radical ideas. The book tells us that Smith believed that the Hebrews made their way to America, and they had a period of intense warfare, and it ended in a split, which resulted in the Native Americans. It was now his mission to restore this ancient and primitive Christianity to America.
I would have liked to have met this guy. His religious ideas were so utterly foreign to everyone in America, and yet he managed to gather a sizable following, large enough to form the town of Nauvoo, Illinois. All the influence sort of fed his ego when he declared that God had chosen him to save a world that was doomed, and only he, Joseph Smith, could decide who made it to heaven. I'm Peter Weller, and this is Renovating a Religion. Now, there was another guy, Charles Grandison Finney, who was incredibly important to the religious culture of the United States from the 19th century to today. He helped start the Second Great Awakening, and while I may be almost infinitely more well-known to the American public, even taking into account the fact that I only seem to attract cult followings, he was almost equally, infinitely more integral to the development of American society. I also really like how he claimed to be reviving the old Presbyterian ideas while simultaneously rejecting the old Calvinist preachings.
Religion was not the first choice for Charles Finney, a New York lawyer who originally came from Connecticut. He received little religious training as a child, although he did attend church. The methods used did not appeal to him, he said. It was the study of law that opened him up into the religious world. In 1824, after leaving his profession, he was ordained as a Presbyterian minister. He stressed the consequence of disobeying God's will, urging people to repent and pressing for others to accept God's salvation. During the War of 1812, fought between the United States and Great Britain, William Miller served as a captain. At this time, he was still a deist, although he later did convert to baptism. However, not fully content with both religious ideals, he eventually formed his own denomination, which foretold the end of the world and the second coming of Christ. It was called Adventism, a denomination which later spawned other smaller Adventist groups.
I think this guy most reminds me of Harold Camping, the man who predicted the apocalypse to be complete approximately a week and a half ago. Miller even got it right all the way to being wrong about his predictions, as the world failed to end on October 22nd, 1844. His followers proceeded to form a denomination of the church whose sole unifying factor was that the second coming was going to happen, and soon.
Hi, I'm Evelyn, and this is a director's note. There were a lot of changes that the Second Great Awakening brought about in America. For one, a new service came about called circuit riding, where people would ride around on their horses and go to different towns just to help the people there. New denominations also came up, such as William Miller's Adventism, as well as Joseph Smith's Mormonism. The church population, as the Second Great Awakening was a religious revival, soared during this time period. The missionary work was also something of great prominence. One thing that characterizes the Second Great Awakening is the Restoration movement, which can be likened to Joseph Smith's theory of a primitive Christianity that needed to be brought back into the United States of America. Although it may not seem so on the surface, the Second Great Awakening actually has impacted modern-day United States of America. When we look around every single day, you see people of different backgrounds, ethnicities, races, but most of all, religions. There's Buddhism, there's Hinduism, there's Islam, And there's also Christianity, which seems to be the most prominent religion in the United States of America. The Second Great Awakening can be an explanation for this. While the factor might be small in the grand scheme of things, you can't deny that the Second Great Awakening helped to keep Christianity as a major religion in America. Yes, there are other factors, such as the Caucasian population being the majority in the United States. However, missionary work that further developed during the Second Great Awakening and other different types of denominations that would appeal to a wider range of people also helped to reach out and convert other people who were adherents to other religions before.
I'm sure there will be a third Great Awakening, this time with platinum plates. For the generic and unnamed channel for the dissemination of random knowledge through the use of short documentaries as part of a vaguely related series, I'm Peter Weller, and this has been Renovating a Religion. Thanks for watching.
What is the filmmaker's purpose? This documentary was really an informative documentary which recounted a lot of the historical background of Mormonism, starting from Joseph Smith and his visions to Brigham Young, their exodus to Utah, and the subsequent events up to present day Mitt Romney and Harry Reid. And so it was very much, I'm here to tell you what Mormonism is about and how it has shaped America. To what extent does the argument have validity? The documentary brings in a lot of experts. It brings in people who are part of the Mormon Church, who have been a part of the Mormon Church. There's also people who study religion, people who have studied about the history of Mormonism, the religious beliefs of Mormonism. And so while they bring in all these professionals, as they could be called, in order to explain all of these facts and tell about the history. And that's how the argument, although it is a very balanced documentary, has a validity. What is the attitude or the viewpoint of the director? What is the tone?
Well, the director uses sides from both pro-Mormon and anti-Mormon sources in order to create a very balanced documentary, but he juxtaposes the two sides in order to create a tone of mystery.
How does the structure of the film help achieve its purpose?
The structure of the film begins with historical reenactments to set up context, which is then followed by interviews of those who would know the Mormon Church, like professors, theologians, people who are in the Mormon Church, such as leaders, or people who have left the Mormon Church. And more historical reenactment is present throughout the film.
What is the argument? What assertions are made?
It's a very balanced documentary. For every interview that it has for Mormonism, it has against Mormonism. So really, all they give you is facts in both sides of the argument, so you get the whole picture.
So all of us thought that the documentary was rather balanced in showing people who supported or for the Mormonism sentiment and people who didn't quite agree with the views. There was a New York Times review that described this documentary as a thoughtful two-part series that clearly and calmly states religion's beliefs without going too overboard on the hype and the passion. The reviewer's name is Neil Genslinger. He correctly notes that the documentary not only includes background on the denomination, but also speculation about what faith and religion actually encompass, so it gives a bit of a philosophical edge to it. He also documents the chronological order of the film, from the founding of Mormonism with Joseph Smith, to the persecution of its members, and to the subsequent retaliation. When he talks about part 2 of the documentary, he thinks that it's not as satisfactory as the first part. He notes that part 2 begins with a, quote, promise to explore how the church went from being denounced by American presidents in the 1880s to having its famed singers perform at presidential inaugurations a century later. However, it does not keep this promise. Instead, it's just a loose collection of personal stories that don't flow well together. It leaves the viewer feeling slightly behind and confused. Genslinger does admit, though, that the way the documentary portrays Mormonism is highly efficient and very desirable. It has a certain unique appeal to it. Now, a second critique believes that the film is worthy of a thorough review, but only gives an overview over all the issues presented in the film. So this reviewer describes the film as contextualizing Mormonism, and goes on to detail that Mormonism is portrayed in a different context than other similar documentaries. It's described as, quote, critical of Mormonism roots, but sympathetic to the Mormons who had to endure the persecutions that had followed. Contextualization is present once again in the Meadows Mountain incident, in which the filmmakers attempted to describe the atmosphere in a time of persecution and skepticism of the religion. All of the interviewed people had believed that Mormonism was affected by the historical situation, though they differed in the beliefs about the extent of the time period's influence. The reviewer notes that knowing the context and the actions of the Meadows Mountain incident actually results in a more sympathetic view towards the Mormon actions. The review does end with the acknowledgement that, quote, the Mormons is a balance piece, but not in terms of giving equal time to both sides and the issues, and poses a series of questions about what it truly means to practice a religion, and the difference between simply studying and actually being a part of it. So both reviews do give that little philosophical edge in which, what is a religion, what is it like to adhere to a religion, to practice its beliefs, and to be a part of that denomination. However, the second review really thinks that this documentary was made for its viewers to feel a bit sympathetic. However, all of us here still believe that it was a very well-balanced documentary, just there to inform and tell facts.